The one thing I know is I've gone through tough times before. Thank you guys, Broncos country. That's right.
I'm no chef, but they should have never let Russ cook. In my last video, I explained to you why Russell Wilson is not washed, why he's due for a bounce-back season, and why he'll give all the haters swirlies in each of his 12 bathrooms, and he's gonna do it with a freshly digested Danger Witch in each bowl. Yeah. Today, though, I'm gonna do the exact opposite. I'm going to break down why Russell Wilson may be broken down, why he's lost his touch, and how the Broncos can move on without him. It gives me no pleasure to make this video, none at all, but it might end up being a dose of reality that Denver needs. And for all of you who delighted in watching my misery last football season, good news, you got more coming your way. I watched an offense score 287 points in 17 games, and just for context, the 2013 Broncos scored 606 points in one less game. Today, I'll break down my fears about Mr. Limited on That's Good Sports. Please retweet, subscribe. Today's episode is sponsored by Goodchop.com/YouTube, and my code That's Good 120. That's Good 120 will get you $120 off your first 4 boxes. Goodchop is your online butcher. Now, I sought an alternative place to get my meat after I got tired of seeing the cuts I wanted out at the grocery store or looking like they'd been sitting there all day. So I chose Goodchop specifically because they work exclusively with family farmers and independent ranchers here in the United States, where the animals are responsibly raised and none of the meat has antibiotics or added hormones. Football toys with my emotions enough, so I don't need those extra hormones. And in my most recent box, I received New York strips, ribeyes, bacon, wild-caught salmon, and chicken. You pick a box size, you select which meats you want, and then it arrives on your doorstep. Talk about meat that can't be beat. But if you're like me, you're probably cooking the strips and ribeyes first and then inhaling them. So if you want the highest quality meats, go to goodchop.com/YouTube. And again, use my code That'sGood120 for $120 off your first 4 boxes. Meat! Meat! All right, let's start with the most obvious, the thing that was very apparent anytime you turned on a Broncos game last season. And yeah, we all had to tune in and watch some of the worst football the game had to offer on national television over and over and over again. Even on fucking Christmas, Russell Wilson's day. Wilson made my daughter cry on Christmas. He was so bad that she stopped believing in Santa. Even worse, I told her Santa is real and that he died of watching Russell Wilson suck.
You killed him.
Russell Wilson used to be able to fit down a chimney with ease, but last year he looked a little, shall we say, stockier. And that really diminished a lot of the magic that made him so special in Seattle. We got used to seeing him spin away from defenders, run the read option, and generally make defenders look silly on a regular basis. That was not the case last year. He lost his slipperiness in the pocket, and it resulted in a league-high 55 sacks, constantly putting the Broncos in long third downs that they weren't able to convert. And it wasn't just sacks. He got hit 65 times while passing, which is probably why he was fighting so many injuries down the stretch. And speaking of those injuries, it is hard to believe that a quarterback will get healthier or more durable into their mid and late 30s. For every Tom Brady, there's a Big Ben, a Matt Ryan, hell, last year's Aaron Rodgers, and of course Peyton Manning, whose physical ability declines. And unlike Peyton Manning, I don't think Russ has the timing or general mastery of an offense to avoid hits and stay upright for 17 games. I'm concerned about that. Play action was Russ's bread and butter in Seattle.
Yeah, pretty much everybody eats bread.
Yes, everybody does like bread, but you need the butter, Russ. And he had 1,000 passing yards off of play fakes mistakes each of his last 3 seasons as a Seahawk. Last year, the Broncos ran play action 112 times, about the same as he did in Seattle, and only came away with 814 passing yards. That leads me to believe Russ was either unable to get to the edge or that teams simply didn't respect the Broncos' run game, probably a bit of both. The run game should be better under Sean Payton, and with a hopefully improved offensive line, maybe Russ doesn't take as many sacks. But if Russ doesn't have the mobility or that extra second to see the field, I'm not sure it's going to look much better. Now, you can see a really bad example of the Broncos' play-action offense on this pick 6 against the Chiefs. Normally, I think Wilson would be able to see this matchup and make Willie Gay miss in the open field, but instead, he throws a really lazy pass that wasn't going to get a first down anyway. Instead, it gets picked off. Russ gets stiff-armed into the turf, channeling his inner Mac Jones, and Willie Gay scores yet another touchdown against Denver. That Gay conversion did force me into therapy. And yeah, they definitely win that game if not for crucial mistakes like that. It's the same with the run-pass options. The Broncos passed 25 times on RPOs and only came away with 165 yards. For context, Russ passed out of an RPO 38 times in 2019 for 344 yards, a full yard and a half more than in 2022. Is part of that due to Nathaniel Hackett's scheme? Maybe. But when a defense no longer respects a QB's wheels, it's hard to suck the linebackers and safeties into the box and punish them down the field. And yes, now I'm blatantly ignoring sucking linebackers and saying Willie Gay. And these weird orange and blue shirts, I don't know what they are, but they're available at BenchwarmerBrew.com, where I sell my coffee, by the way. Ryan Leaf, who I think is one of the most thoughtful voices in sports and certainly has a unique perspective on these kinds of things, offered an explanation for why Russ was so bad last year. Dating back to before he was drafted in 2012, Russell Wilson had a working relationship with sports psychologist Trevor Moab, who preached the idea of neutral thinking. Essentially, that means getting rid of the negative thoughts. That's a very simplified way of putting it, but it helped Wilson in the first decade of his career.
There's a reason why when he steps up to the microphone at the end and says, "Broncos country, let's ride." He says it every single time. That's the neutral aspect of things. He never got low.
Unfortunately, very early in the 2021 season, while Russ was still a Seahawk, Moab passed after a battle with cancer. It was totally unexpected, and Moab had kept his condition a secret, meaning Russ was blindsided and really thrown for a loop when he lost a friend and a mentor. Wilson was totally off kilter after losing him, losing 6 of 7 games after his passing, and it's hard to speculate, but that might have left Russ with a void in his personal life and unable to achieve the same level of balance that kept him going in his career through a divorce, a Super Bowl losing interception, and some strange relationships with his teammates. I don't know if it affected Wilson's status in Seattle or if it played into his wanting out, but that lack of guidance probably hindered his transition to Denver. Now we know that Russ is searching for a voice, a mentor to help him through what I hope is a temporary rough patch in his career, but there's no guarantees. Sean Payton has said publicly that he's not on board with letting outside coaches in the building, even if it's on behalf of the franchise QB. With all the flack Wilson gets in the media and from fans, some of it is justified and some of it inappropriate. I wonder whether Russ can navigate those waters anymore or whether he will sink. When Russ is on and he's winning, his attitude, albeit corny or whatever you want to call it, works. When he's struggling and the team is losing because of it, it becomes a detriment. Yes, this
Broncos country, let's ride.
Went from a rallying cry to a punchline in the matter of a single game. That loss to Seattle effectively flipped the season from hopeful to dreadful. And I don't think Russ was the same after that game. If you remember, he actually looked pretty sharp in that one, and he had the offense on schedule, if not for a pair of really poorly timed fumbles from Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams, which I covered in the last episode. People forget Wilson threw for 340 yards in that game, hit 69% of his passes, and didn't turn the ball over. But after that embarrassing loss in his old stadium, Wilson never racked up more than 286 yards and never hit that same completion mark. It was like that loss changed him. You saw it a week later against Houston when he was soaring balls out of the end zone and getting booed off the field in his first home game as a Bronco. A few weeks later, Wilson was at home against the Colts on Thursday night, and after two really awful picks, which forced overtime, Wilson had 4th and goal with an opportunity to win the game and straight up missed KJ Hamler wide open in the middle of the field, which caused KJ to lose his mind and probably injure himself in the process. And look, I get that Russ probably has PTSD from throwing slants to that part of the field, but it's incredible that he either missed the read or just spaced out on what should have been a game-winning play. Now I get that quarterbacks go through progressions, and his first read on that play was Courtland Sutton, and that Russ was ultimately throwing to KJ just way too late. But quarterbacks who are in their 11th year have to be able to make these plays, either by diagnosing that Courtland Sutton will be too covered pre-snap and getting to his next reads quicker, or just seeing that KJ will have the open play. I think good QBs scan the entire field right after the snap. That way they can break off their first read knowing a play is elsewhere. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, especially in the red zone, always seem to get these plays right. After 11 years, this is not something I think can be magically injected into Russell Wilson's game. I think he is not orchestrating the offense at the line of scrimmage and is at the mercy of the play call and at the mercy of his early reads winning their battles post-snap. It wasn't just that Hamler play from last year. It was Russ not seeing a very wide-open Greg Dulcich literally right in front of him. I don't know if mentally Russ can regain the focus that made him so good for a decade in Seattle. I don't know. Again, like I said in my last video, I hope a year removed from the trade and the lowered expectations this year make things easier on him, but the expectations are low for a reason. Hall of Fame quarterbacks generally don't have this bad of a season and then bounce back. Even when their teams have been bad, QBs like Aaron Rodgers in 2018 still put up 25 touchdowns and just 2 picks, while the Packers went 6-9 with him under center. The Broncos were exceptional on defense last year, and Russ, along with Nate Dogg Hackett, wasted that unit's effort. That's what really gives me concern. It was losing 5 one-score games in a stretch of 6 weeks. It was losing 10-9 to the Ravens in a game where Lamar Jackson got hurt. It's that in those close games, we regularly saw Russ not able to make 1 to 2 plays to make a difference. The entire offense needs to be good to be a contender if you're talking about a team. But good QBs have to be expected to turn out positive plays entirely on their own. I mentioned a few of his best games in the last episode. His worst game was indeed the Patrick Star Christmas roasting. My quarterback roasting on an open fire.
That's not what he wanted to cook.
It's the only game he threw 3 interceptions. It featured his lowest passer rating at 54.2. His passer rating was lower than his completion percentage, which is really hard to do. Plus, he took 6 sacks. Remember, this was against a decimated Rams roster with Baker Mayfield playing in just his 3rd game with the team. It's the only game Baker looked like a freaking Hall of Fame QB. Sure, you could blame the defense, but let's just blame Baker playing well on Russ too. Now, it wasn't just Russ's worst game, it was the team's worst game, which made this game Denver's most shameful loss in 2022. What strikes fear in my heart is Russ's first interception. It's just the 3rd play of the game for the offense, and he throws to a double-covered Courtland Sutton. Russ has a clean pocket, so there's no excuse for a veteran QB to sail this ball, which Russ does. Wrong read, clean pocket, terrible throw. I expect rookie QBs to show more poise than that. His second pick to Bobby Wagner was just as inexcusable. It's like he made the decision to throw to Greg Dulcich without checking to see if he was covered. And the final smoking gun, Russ, doing exactly what he does best, moving out of the pocket, throwing deep, then underthrows Greg Dulcich, who had a step for his third pick of the game. When a quarterback is making mistakes on his best play, it's not just concerning, it's alarming. This would be like Tom Brady throwing his 1-yard jump ball to Gronk or Mike Evans out of the damn stadium. Interceptions weren't a real issue with Russ. Just 11 on the season and only 2 games with multiple picks. The 3 games with 6 sacks taken are a bigger concern. I mentioned he took 55 on the season. That's been a Russell Wilson problem for several years, though. We blamed all of those sacks on the Seahawks offensive line, but Russ is the issue.
I'm the problem, it's me.
I'd say 20 plus sacks every season are on him and him alone, and I don't know if Sean Payton can fix it. Last episode, I put a lot of stock in Sean Payton, but if Pete Carroll, who is just as good as Sean Payton in my opinion, couldn't help Russ in that area, I'm not sure anybody can. The other game that is unforgivable to me is the loss to the Ravens. Like that painful OT loss to Indy, the Broncos offense only scored 9 points. In today's NFL, that's like going to Vegas and not seeing a single titty. Not a single titty. Problem number 1, it's 3rd and 5 early in this game and they run a draw because the play caller doesn't trust Russ in that situation. Russ did drop a moon ball to Jerry Jeudy, but remove that 40-yard play and Russ only tosses 150 yards on the day while completing 77% of his passes. That's just ineffective passing. 3rd and 10 in the 4th quarter. Russ overthrows Montrell Washington deep. Again, this is Russ's bread and butter.
I mean, pretty much everybody eats bread.
And look, Montrell Washington being the deep guy here isn't ideal from a play calling perspective, but you gotta make this throw. That would have won the game. And finally, the Ravens scored a touchdown to take the lead with 30 seconds left in this game. Russ started to move the ball down the field, and on the final play, Russ is simply too slow to pick up enough yards for the game-winning kick attempt. Brandon McManus is again, like in week 1, asked to make a 63-yard field goal to win the game, which if you don't remember, was the longest field goal in NFL history for a very long time. When you pay a guy like Russ, you expect him to either keep you out of situations like that by building leads against teams playing without their starting QB, or lead game-winning drives in those situations. Mahomes, Rodgers, Allen, Hurts, I think any of those QBs get the dub in the same scenario. The only good thing from that game was hearing Kevin Harlan describe how I masturbate.
Whacked hard. Wow.
So, what happens if my worst fears are confirmed and Russell Wilson is indeed washed? Unlike my towels. I think the Broncos made a pretty clear statement when they signed Jarrett Stidham that they've got a plan B, and a pretty decent one if Wilson struggles. Although Ben Daniel is my plan A at this point. Now, if Russ struggles, like he did last season, he's not going to make it through 16 games. That's a big difference. In that scenario, Denver can also move on from Wilson in the 2024 offseason with a dead cap number of $85 million. The most natural out would come in the 2025 offseason when the Broncos would accrue just $31 million of dead cap if they chose to cut him after his 3rd year in Denver. I'm sure my buddy Zach Seegers is mopping floors at Harvard writing formulas for how to cut Russ on a chalkboard, but I'm more of a Robin Williams than a Matt Damon type when it comes to that stuff. Or am I Ben Affleck?
No, fuck you.
If Russ is bad again, the best case scenario for the Broncos is for Russ to be really bad. That way, Denver could give up on the season, draft a quarterback like, God willing, Caleb Williams or Drake May, and give Russ a courtesy season as a bridge QB while that rookie gets ready.
Whacked hard. Come.
And the fact that I'm already thinking about how the Broncos can get another quarterback is probably the biggest sign that Russ might be done. And I've already unpacked the best case scenario in the last vid. Make sure you check it for my positive spin, but the worst case scenario seems more likely. And that would be 7 and 10 for the Broncos. Russ gets better, but is no longer great. That's the worst case scenario. Thanks for watching That's Good Sports. Please subscribe here. Again, the Why Russ is Still Good video already up. Appreciate all of you watching. And, help. Please be good, Russ. We want you to be good, Russ. I really do.